And joining us now to break this down is Hayvi Bouzo, a broadcast journalist and founder of Yala. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Quite the images here. Former wanted jihadist shaking hands with the U.S. president, talking about normalizing relations between the country. What would that look like?
Well, it's absolutely surreal to see this, knowing that Ahmad Shara at one point was actually a member of ISIS and then the Al-Qaeda. Then he actually did fight them. However, a lot of the elements that are still under the control and connected to the Ahmad Shara forces in Syria are still members of these, come from these ideologies. They have a history of being part of these extremist terrorist groups. And I think that was one of the points that were addressed by President Trump. Now, it's very important to note that President Trump's visit, to these countries in the Middle East is basically going back to the Trump administration's first administration, first term, when the American leadership was actually present and showcasing that the partnership is there with these Arab countries and that the U.S. role in the region is important, is there, it's constructive. Now, there are some departures from the previous administration in terms of Qatar and Iran. That said, it's important to note that though Qatar and Turkey have been the ones to have a role in Syria, where they have been the ones having those relationships with Ahmad al-Shara before then, the HTS. And President Trump said that Turkey is the country that has the keys to Syria. He decided to make these announcements from Saudi Arabia instead. So that was interesting. That is kind of elevating the relationship with Saudi Arabia. And we know that Saudi Arabia is actually heading in the opposite direction. If, we think about the radicalization and the support of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists by Turkey and Qatar is not the same direction that Saudi Arabia is heading. Right. So that is important to note out. That said, there's just still some questions in terms of, are we seeing that the lifting of sanctions, which is important because there's, we're talking about 90% of people in Syria are living under poverty lines. 1 of 3 people are in severe poverty. But are we talking about these demands or asks from President Trump as conditions to lifting the sanctions, or are we seeing the sanctions being lifted, but we're talking about, okay, we need to have the Abraham Accords, we need to, remove all of the terrorist groups and militants that were fighting with these Ahmad Shara forces. We're going to be removing all of the Palestinian terrorist groups. Are those going to be asks? Are there going to be conditions? Are we going to be seeing specific steps to making sure that these are going to be established or not?
All right, and Javier, you mentioned this yourself, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran. How could this rapprochement between the U.S. and Syria really impact the power dynamics in the region?
One of the interesting things that the report I was just listening to on your channel was saying that Turkey and Qatar will basically have involvements in how things move forward, right? We're talking about Turkey wanting to have military bases in Syria. Will the U.S. allow for that? Because, when we talk about Turkey, we know that we're talking about Erdogan's government. We know that they are Islamists, right? We know that there are the Kurdish forces that are supported by the U.S. This is an issue that we need to be discussing, and we need to see the implications of that. Also, in terms of Qatar, Qatar has close relationship. They're not only the Muslim Brotherhood supporters, but they also have close relationships with Iran. So are we going to be, making some actual specific asks for Qatar to make sure that these relationships are actually going to be utilized and not actually becoming like, the Trojan horse of bringing these Muslim Brotherhood elements into Syria, which are actually connected to the Iranian-backed militias. There are those historical relationships between the two. So, there's a lot of questions. And also when we talk about the ISIS, the detention centers for ISIS, these are now under the control of the SDF. Are we talking about collaboration between the Syrian government forces and the SDF, or are they going to be transferred completely from the SDF into now the government in Damascus control. So, yeah.
All right, Hayvi Bouzo, thank you very much for that update and for your analysis.